for that perfect and comprehensive introduction. It feels like I can just dive right in after that lead in. Thank you. So, welcome everybody. I just want to echo Rebecca's excitement that so many folks joined us today. We are both very excited about bringing SBV to the state of Ohio. Common Impact is a national organization that is based in New York. I happen to live and work in Columbus, Ohio. So skills-based volunteering is, of course, a concept that I'm very passionate and excited about, and have been so excited to work closely with Rebecca and Serve Ohio to bring this model and this initiative to the state of Ohio, which is, of course, very near and dear to my heart. So I do want to just reiterate an additional point that Rebecca made, that we're providing hopefully lots of information and learning for you as part of the initial webinar, and then of course today's webinar. But if a huge takeaway that we hope that you all will have is that there are so many resources and some really comprehensive resources that we'll talk through that follow this specific model that we're going to highlight and provide much more tangible and detailed guidance on how you can implement. So hopefully you walk away from today with some excitement and knowledge about how to move forward, and then can utilize those resources moving forward. And I wanted to just highlight that because I recognize that as we go through the information today, this might feel fairly new and a bit overwhelming. And so just want to make sure that you understand this is certainly not your last opportunity to do a deep dive into this model and approach. So great, a little bit about Common Impact. We're a nonprofit ourselves. We help to develop, design, and implement skills-based volunteering programming with companies and nonprofits. And so we work with companies to understand what their goals and strategies are related to skills-based volunteering and engaging their employees in donating their professional skills to local organizations. And then we design and execute programming as part of that. One of the biggest values that we bring to both our corporate and nonprofit partners is our consultative approach, and which is what we will really dive into today. And that includes, and this is also one of my favorite parts of my job, where we get to connect directly with organizations and dive into understanding what their needs and challenges are, exploring what's underlying that need or challenge, and then crafting a skills-based volunteering project that will help them to address that need or challenge or goal. And so we're going to talk through what that process looks like and some of the best practices that we see in that process. So quick agenda, we're going to review very quickly some SBV basics. If you did not attend the initial webinar, you will not be totally lost, but I do encourage you to loop back to it. I know that Rebecca has recordings available on the website. So that part, we'll review that, those pieces very quickly. We'll talk about the goals of project scoping and planning. You'll hear me use that term a lot, scoping. That really means planning your project. So diving in, kind of scoping through what those needs and goals are. We're going to talk about how you might identify a project need. How do you get underneath kind of what's underlying some of the challenges that you might be experiencing, and how you'll translate or craft that into an actual project description. We'll talk a little bit about volunteer recruitment and point you to additional really neat resources for where you might recruit volunteers once your project is clearly defined and scoped. And we'll leave some time at the end for question and answer. As Rebecca shared, I'll be sure to check the chat window if there are questions. And I know Rebecca will keep me honest and jump in throughout, or if you are able to speak up, I want to ask your question. That way we want to make sure that this certainly does feel conversational and that you're able to clarify or ask questions as they come up. So great, let's dive into that quick overview. So skills-based volunteering simply is lending one's professional skills to community organizations. So what does that look like? When we think about professional skills, skills can be a very loaded word. There's lots of different skills out there. When we see the types of skills that we commonly see utilized in SBV are listed here, and these also translate very well to what some of the most common challenges are that nonprofits are experiencing. So likely we're looking at this list, we're seeing things like HR, technology, data support, marketing, and thinking to ourselves, those are really skills and resources and talents that are certainly very much in demand at my organization. And so what we're going to talk about today is how you can translate those needs into a project so that somebody with these skills can plug in and support your work. So just a little bit of kind of a visual to see what that might look like. Now, of course, we want to make sure that we are matching skills and experience closely with our project need. So we would want to, if, for example, we were engaging a volunteer in any one of these projects or support initiatives, we want to make sure that that volunteer has some experience and ability to execute that project. But I do think it's important to just think about on a high level the different types of skills that are available and how those might translate into a project. So one of the things that we're going to really talk about is we're not going to approach volunteers and say, we need help with finance, or I need a finance volunteer. The ask is really around this second layer. So we need support with developing a better grant tracking system, or we need support with making financial projections so that we're sure that we're putting the right pieces in place for 2021. And so that's what we're going to focus on, is the how to, but it's also just very important to understand that it is vital as we approach skills-based volunteering and recruiting and onboarding volunteers, that we are recognizing that we're not onboarding a skills-based volunteer just to have access on an ongoing basis to a person with these skills, that we're really onboarding them to help and provide support on a discrete need or challenge. One of the things that we covered in a lot of detail in the SBV 101 webinar was the focus on capacity building. And so that's a key component of the common impact model. And so I just wanted to provide this quick definition, is that really capacity building is about bringing a nonprofit to the next level of operational or programmatic financial or organizational maturity. That doesn't necessarily mean growth, so expansion. In some ways it might be. It might also just mean strengthening. So if you've got a system or a process that's not working or has a high level of risk, addressing that challenge is a capacity building endeavor in and of itself. And so I just want to reiterate that really the common impact model and the focus on this approach to skills-based volunteering really is around meeting capacity needs. So we think about capacity building projects. You'll hear me use that term a lot. And I went and to just reiterate, projects being something that has a clear start and end date. It has a clearly defined goal and has phases or steps to completion. Again, we'll talk in more detail about how we get there, but it's just important for us to understand that we're really looking to scope projects or discrete engagements and not long-term ongoing opportunities, which certainly have their place in all of our work. But for the purposes of engaging skills-based volunteers, we really want to think about how we can engage them in distinct projects, such as a communication strategy, updating or identifying the right technology and updating it, improving how we might collect our data or improve our outcome measurement. Those are all things that improve the capacity and the ability of our organizations to deliver our missions. I'm going to pause there and see if we do have any questions before we move into the how to do all of this. All right, great. Rebecca will continue to kind of keep me honest and jump in if with questions as we have them, but I'll keep cruising on. So we're going to dive into project scoping. So we've really talked a lot about what a project is, what we're looking to document or define or execute. And so now we really want to think about how to do that. How do I craft my many, many needs into a skills-based volunteering engagement? So I wanted to just quickly revisit the model that we covered in detail in the initial webinar, but just as a review or new for folks, these are the key steps in the skills-based volunteering process. So we want to first just recognize, are we ready for SBV? We have online tools and assessments that you can utilize to understand if your organization is at the appropriate point in its life cycle to engage in SBV. And if you're not, how to get there. What are some adjustments or things that you need to work on? And then we dive into scoping a project, which is where we're going to spend the rest of our time today. We then want to recruit and match volunteers with the appropriate skill sets to our project. And then, of course, manage our project. And we want to utilize volunteer management general best practices and provide our volunteers with a quality experience while also ensuring that our organizational needs are being met. And then again, we want to evaluate our project. This is particularly important when we execute our first or initial projects. How did it go? Did it go as we expected? What would we adjust or change for the future? And what might our next SBV engagement look like? Hopefully, as you implement SBV projects, you continue to think about how this might be part of your ongoing organizational planning. And so we very intentionally structure this in a cyclical manner so that to think about the fact that this can be an ongoing initiative or strategy for your organization. The reality of our work is that we most likely have an abundance of capacity building needs and challenges and lots of different ways that skills-based volunteers could plug into our work. And so we might even think about that on an annual basis as, okay, here are some of the challenges or goals that we have. Where can SBVs plug in? So lots more on all of these stages in some of the resources that we'll share. But again, today we're going to really dive into project scoping or planning. When we think about project scoping, a little bit about what we're trying to achieve. It's very important for us to have a very clear understanding of our needs, both so that we know that we are investing our time and resources into the right project, but also so that we're very clear with any potential skills-based volunteers exactly what our needs are. So not being ambiguous and just saying our finances are a mess or we don't have enough capacity within our HR department, to very clearly understanding what's underlying that. And we'll talk about that process. One of the challenges that we hear frequently from corporate partners that are looking to engage in skills-based volunteering is around nonprofit readiness. So the nonprofits have not clearly and comprehensively explored the underlying challenge before they have reached out to us to ask for volunteer support. And so we end up spending a lot of time exploring the need, or we find that we're not matched well to the project because they asked for general finance help, but what we really ultimately uncovered was that they have a technology problem. So it's important for us as the nonprofit partners to do that work ahead of time. And we'll talk about how to do that. And to highlight the root cause. There might be a few. Lack of resources or capacity is certainly underlying a lot of the challenges that we experience in the nonprofit sector, but exploring things like, well, is it a technology issue or is it a process issue? Do we not have enough staff, or our staff, have we not allocated staff to this function or initiative? Are things not scheduled correctly? Are we missing a plan? What are we missing? So again, just highlighting that root cause and just going through that process. Ultimately, we want to be able to craft a project description. We likely have descriptions of the jobs or activities that we have volunteers do within our organization. And so I'll highlight a format that we like to use, but you'd certainly be welcome to use a different format if it's consistent with how you typically do it. But ultimately, you want to be able to document a description that clearly defines the organizational need and displays an understanding of that need and defines the project goals. So what is needed? What are you hoping that the volunteer team or single volunteer will do or execute for you? And what's the estimated timeline? Is this a shorter project? You need somebody to plug in for 1 month? Or is this a longer term project? Like you're redoing your website. So that's more of a 6-month type engagement. So really that estimated timeline. So this, you can think about your project description as there's descriptions that you're going to put out there into the world. So what are you going to use to recruit and onboard volunteers? And if we're not ready to document our needs into a project description, we're probably not quite ready to recruit volunteers. I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions that folks have.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat box, Margie.
All right, great. I will keep cruising through. So as I shared with you earlier, one of the big components of the work of Common Impact is to connect directly with nonprofits and to identify potential skills-based volunteering projects. We do this hundreds of times a year, and really no two projects are exactly the same, and no two processes are exactly the same, which is one of the really fun and challenging components of our work. However, there are some general rules of thumb or approaches that we typically try to utilize when we embark on this journey with our nonprofit partners. And so when we think about wanting to engage in skills-based volunteering, I encourage nonprofits to think about this. You can approach this in a couple ways. And there certainly are overlaps within these. You can think about it from a goal or asset standpoint. So what are some of our organizational, personal, department, program, or team goals? And so these could be things that are in your board approved strategic plan. These could be things that are part of your department's work plan. These could be goals that your specific program has for the future. So you'll see we've listed a few things here, like launch a new program. We really want to add a new workforce development program for our clients. Help us get there. And we'll talk about how to translate that. But so we can think about it from an organizational goal standpoint. We can also think about it from a need or challenge standpoint. If we were all in the room together, I'd ask everybody to raise their hand, and I'm sure everybody's hand would be in the air if I said, do you have any needs or challenges at your organization? Of course, we all do. Every company and nonprofit certainly has them. But we also recognize that in nonprofits, because we are working in such a resource-constrained environment, our challenges can be pretty acute and are typically related to a lot of those functional areas that we identified early on in the presentation. So when we think about needs and challenges, you might think about what's keeping you up at night. Hopefully nothing related to work, but if something is, let's highlight that and prioritize that very, very quickly. Or what's a daily headache? What's something that frequently comes up in staff or team meetings as a challenge? what is something that is taking up a lot of your time or kind of brain energy, that or what's a problem that you could really use fixed? Is it a process? Is it something that's missing? And so you see here we've got some needs and challenges that are identified. And a lot of times what we see with nonprofits is we've had this challenge for so many years and we're just not sure how to get started on it. And so we'll talk about what that might look like. We also recognize, and what we frequently see is that an organization might have a goal. So we really want to increase our volunteer recruitment, but they have a challenge related to meeting that goal. We recognize that volunteer recruitment is really driven by our website, and our website is very out of date. So there's certainly a lot of overlap here, but thinking about goals or needs and challenges is a great way to just start generating ideas. And then we dive, excuse me, and then we dive into a consultative process. Lots of question asking. And so I do encourage you to think about going through this process or initial exercise with one or two members of your team. We typically request that nonprofits, when they're going through a consulting call with us, have at least two members of their staff on the call. And we find that these different perspectives can be very illuminating for us, but mostly for them. Just going through the process of exploring a challenge and continuously asking why can be very, very helpful in just understanding what's the root cause, what's underlying this need. As I was actually preparing for the webinar today, I was recognizing, when I was looking at all these question marks, I was recognizing that this reminds me a lot of my 7-year-old, who constantly asks so many questions, and has actually forced me to really explore some reasons why. I don't know why we do it this way, so let's explore that. And so, you might even think about, just pretend you've got a 7-year-old in the room with you that's just continuously saying, well, why, what happens when this happens? So a interesting way to think about it. But again, the point being, don't just stop with, we have an outdated website. What are the unique challenges that you have with the website? What makes you think it's outdated? Well, it's very text heavy. It hasn't been updated since we've restructured our programs. We point more applicants to the website and they're reporting that they can't find what they're looking for. Okay, great. Wonderful. Why haven't you made those necessary changes? Well, we have a general idea of what we want to do, but we're just not sure how to lay it out. We don't have access to web design or web architecture skill set. It would be great if somebody could just outline the way that our website should look given our new program structure. Great. So really there we uncovered a need. You could also think about, no two exploration processes are going to look exactly the same, but the point of this initial piece is to spend that time exploring the need or the challenge. So why is probably going to be the question that comes up a lot. Also, what's underlying this? What have we tried in the past? What's working? What's not? Another big question is, what is missing? Is it skills? Is it technology? Is it a process? Is it a strategy? Is it funding? So again, just asking lots of those questions. Some of the main elements that we think about with project scoping is questioning, identifying, and prioritizing. So we've talked a lot about just let's ask those questions. Let's go through that exploration process, and then identifying what's undergirding all of this. And this a lot of times requires us to be very candid. And the reality is that no organization is perfect. We all have our challenges. When we go through this process with nonprofits, particularly we dig into things like the culture at the organization, the HR structure, the finances, their policies. And I frequently tell nonprofits, nothing that you say will shock us. We are by and large experiencing as a sector some very common challenges. So this process will require you to kind of dig in and be candid and honest with yourself. And if you're not going to get the right needs met. You're not going to scope the right project. So just really get in and identify and kind of be brave in this piece. And then also the prioritizing. We've talked a lot about, and you'll constantly hear me reiterate, I get that we're working in a resource constrained environment. It's challenging. I think it's important just to recognize that. We have lots of needs and we wish that we could meet them all. So let's prioritize. For the purposes of this project or this year, we're going to focus on XYZ. What's most urgent? So what is just really that challenge that everybody agrees just needs to be fixed today, or as quickly as possible? And also, what's realistic? We may need a new building for our programming, but that's just not going to happen within the next 3 years. Okay, how can we adjust and realistically still meet our needs or address our challenge, but outside of buying a brand new building? So again, just being realistic. And then what will have the most impact? What's going to truly make a difference? If we fix one piece of this, that would be nice, but it's not that big of a deal. What can we fix or address that will have an impact? And that could be an internal impact, right? It could be making our staff more efficient, making our staff happier and healthier, reducing errors in our database. So when we think about impact, it's not just about the impact on our clients or our impact on our community. It can be an impact on improving our organization, which we all know is very important, and the outcome of that being greater and deeper and expanded impact on our community as well. And I do see that we have a question, and I think this is a great place to pause. I'll do my best to read it. That's great. So Tiffany asks the improv, and this a lot of times does feel like a bit of an improv session. How do you break the ice for conversations like this? Is there a template or guide? There's lots of, we do have some worksheets that are available to guide these conversations and some initial exploratory questions that you might ask. So stay tuned for that. I think one of the big pieces is just setting aside the time to have the conversation, getting the right folks in the room. So, okay, we have a marketing problem. I need our marketing person and the person who does our websites and our program director who utilizes most of the marketing materials in the room together to talk this out. And it might feel messy and ambiguous and very broad at first, but just honoring that process of going through, okay, well, why? Well, what's underlying that? How can we address that? What's been done? What would be ideal? Again, we've got lists of those types of questions in the worksheets that we have, but from a process standpoint, I think the most important thing is getting buy-in from everybody to set aside an hour to start the conversation, and getting multiple perspectives and documenting those. Tiffany, does that help to answer the question? That's a really good question. Okay, great. I see. Thank you. So we'll assume that's helpful. And folks are welcome to speak up if they do want to ask a question or pose it in the chat window. I'll pause again before moving on in case folks do have a question, as I recognize we're throwing a lot at you. All right, great. I will keep moving forward, and I want to give us a couple examples of this process. And so one of the things that I like to share with nonprofits, and that I think we've touched on a bit, is we need help with marketing is not a skills-based volunteering ask. What makes a compelling, helpful, impactful, discreet ask is we need an assessment of the look and feel of our website. And again, so the process of project scoping is going from the need, we need help with marketing, to what we see that's starred here, which would be an actual statement of a project goal. So let's talk through what that might look like. And so this is the type of conversation that we would frequently have with nonprofits. And this is a process that you can go through internally. Of course, your responses are going to look very different and should be related to your own unique organization. So we recognize my organization really needs help with marketing. Okay, so tell me a little bit about that. What's seems to be the big challenge or the main challenge with marketing? Well, there's just a ton of inconsistency. Everybody's out there. Each of our program leads in departments is out there kind of sharing their own collateral. Over the years, it's gotten really inconsistent. Everybody's sharing different types of metrics. They use different wording when they talk about our mission and impact. We've even had different nonprofit partners and volunteers say they didn't even realize that we ran XYZ program or that we did this aspect of our work because there's just so much inconsistency out there. Okay, yeah, that's definitely a challenge. Why do you think that that is the case? Well, you know what? Our mission is just really ambiguous. We don't serve clients directly. We help to serve agencies that address the homeless crisis. Oh, okay. So that is challenging. Now, is the issue that staff just aren't following the right process, or is the issue that you don't have any standard language? Well, you know what? We really don't have any standard language. We have grown as an agency over the last several years. We've added new programs, and each program lead has just kind of developed their own messaging because they were responsible for their own outreach or recruitment. And so they just kind of went off on their own, and we never really came together under the same umbrella to talk about a consistent story or message. And that's probably a piece at that moment or point in time of the conversation, you are the nonprofit is kind of coming to a realization of, oh, so this is a piece but that's behind our marketing challenge. This could be where we use help. So I'm recognizing, I think what we really need, or a great starting point, would be just some consistent messaging. And that it would be great to get an outside perspective on that, how we do it, what would be compelling, and then we could allow our different departments to tweak that or use it in their own way. But we need to develop and document what our consistent messaging is. We have lots of information and collateral out there, but we just need somebody to kind of go through it and identify a consistent theme or key messaging. Great. So our project is going to be a volunteer or team of volunteers is going to develop 3 to 5 key messages that can then be utilized by leads in the organization in in executing their own outreach. So we see how we've gone from the ambiguous, I need help with marketing, to a team is going to um, develop 3 to 5 key messages. Now, of course, it would be great if we had a marketing firm internal to our organization and they could then revamp everything related to our marketing strategy and implementation. The reality is that that is not typical of SBV engagements. We want to be able to be very clear with our volunteers about what we need, why we need it, and how it will support our mission. I'm going to go through one more of these processes and then I'll pause for questions because I know that this is a lot of info. So we talked a bit about Essentially, we could go from an organizational challenge or a need, or we could also maybe start with a goal. So we have some organizational goals. So let's think about, we've got a goal to launch a new program. We want to add a workforce development component to our work because we recognize that that is a missing piece for the clients that we serve, is placing them into well-paying careers or jobs. And this is a really big strategic focus for our board of directors and leadership. And so uh, we are putting a lot of resources towards developing this new program. With the new program, we recognize that we're going to have to do a lot of fundraising because, well, we want to onboard new staff, we need new marketing materials, we might need to buy a new database. So we need a fundraising plan. The other big piece to it is we need partners. We need to identify both nonprofit and corporate partners that could work with us on this new program. So we need some skill development, and then we also need corporate partners where we can place jobs or place our clients into jobs. Okay, so right there we have two pretty big needs, right? We've got fundraising and partnerships. So this would be an area where we'd need to make a priority. So a volunteer team we could go down that stream and think about how can a volunteer team support fundraising, or okay, we might then think about, well, what do we have internally? And so I might hear from the nonprofit, you know what? Our board of directors is really great around fundraising. We have an awesome development director. We know some of our funders are already excited about this. And so we think that we can manage that piece. We'd really like to prioritize the partnerships piece because that's an area we don't have a lot of the internal skills or capacity, or we don't have a plan or aren't sure where to start. So let's prioritize that. Okay, great. So tell me a little bit about what you need or what's missing when you think about how you're going to onboard partners for the program. Well, what we recognize that we're missing is we need marketing materials. We need collateral. How are we going to introduce the program to new partners? How are we going to recruit potential corporate volunteers? But we're not sure who to reach out to. We know that a lot of folks in our community are doing workforce development work, both nonprofits that have job skills training that we could refer clients to, but then there's also a lot of companies that we know would be really excited to hire our clients. And we just aren't sure who to identify and who to reach out to. Okay, so let's talk about that, and let's make a priority there. Well, we've got a great marketing team in-house, and I think that that's an area that we can manage. But what we could really use is a list of potential partners that we might be able to reach out to that would be a good fit for our program. Great. So now we've gone from we need help with launching a program to we are going to engage a team of volunteers and helping to develop some criteria. So identifying kind of who would make a good partner and listing out those factors, and then executing some of that research and identifying 5 nonprofit partners and 10 corporate partners that we could target for at the end of this project. So I know I've shared a lot there. I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions about kind of either of those 2 exercises that we went through, or the general process of going from ambiguous need to potential project. All right, great. I'm going to keep cruising along. Before we move on, I do just want to recognize and honor that, of course, we all would love to have a significant amount of support or an ongoing volunteer firm or team of consultants that would walk us all the way through and do all the heavy lifting to launch this new program or revamp our marketing. And there are going to be organizational needs that you encounter that are not a good fit for skills-based volunteering. And that's absolutely fine. I'll point you to some of the resources that we'll point you to. Also have a cost benefit calculator where you might think about wanting to hire a consultant or outsourcing for XYZ reason. But there are going to be some needs that it makes sense and would make an impact if you scoped those into skills-based volunteering projects. So this is certainly not to say that every single need that you have should be narrowed into an SBV engagement, because we also recognize that some of the challenges or goals that nonprofits have might be part of a multi-year or extremely complex or comprehensive strategy, and it doesn't make sense to have a single team or group bite off or address one small need or challenge within that, and you might need to find other resources to address that. I have very rarely encountered a nonprofit that just could not benefit from SBV in some way or fashion. And so if you go down through a process and you get to a potential challenge and you realize it can't be broken down, you can go back to the drawing board and just recognize, okay, this might not be the best fit for SBV ever or at this time. So just wanted to kind of add that caveat that we recognize that not everything can follow this process. So we've gone from we've gone through two processes, right? Of just really kind of whiteboarding, exploring a need, and then also we've talked through how we might prioritize some of our steps in a new process or steps to achieving a goal and where it makes sense to focus SBV resources. So we've got a couple general projects that we've identified here. Our next step would be to really think about, is this project ready? And these are some of the factors that we think about or that we consider when identifying or assessing whether a project is ready. And by ready, we mean, is it ready to be matched to a team of volunteers, both from a description standpoint, but then also internally? So are there defined project goals? So do we have a statement like, we need 3 to 5 key messages, or a team will develop a list of 10 corporate partners to identify? So a very clearly defined goal or deliverable. That goal or deliverable could also be a recommendation. So sometimes that goal or deliverable is a big, long plan. Sometimes the single statement that says, volunteer matches the ideal technology for your organization. So it does not have to be incredibly comprehensive or complex. It really is about, what do you need from the team? And there's a defined project scope. So we'll talk about how to document that scope, plan, or description. But the other rule of thumb, and as I apparently use my kids as examples a lot, but if I can't explain it to my 5-year-old, I'm probably not quite there yet, right? So probably 5-year-olds aren't going to understand the nuances behind the capacity building challenges that we as a sector face, but I love that just general rule of thumb. If you can't explain it very clearly, we're not there yet. We've got just a little bit more exploring and defining to do. Is the project a priority? So does this have buy-in from multiple levels of staff? Does everybody agree that addressing this is important to the organization and is the right way to approach the challenge? So we might have the organizational goal to recruit 100 new volunteers. The executive director might think it's because we don't have great corporate partnerships, but the marketing director might think the challenges of the website's outdated. So that's a conversation and consensus that needs to take place well in advance of recruiting a team of volunteers. And that, again, just that it feels like a priority, everybody's excited. One of the things I encourage nonprofits to think about is this shouldn't be one person's pet project. It should resonate with lots of folks. that there is project leadership, that there's a staff, an internal staff member that has the capacity to support the project, and also the ability and autonomy to make some decisions, that they have the perspective for the volunteers, that they can share the background behind the project and get decisions made, and that there's some kind of post-project support plan. The majority of SBV projects include some kind of recommendation. So we recommend this architecture for your website. We recommend this volunteer management technology. And so making sure that there is some buy-in, again, probably from leadership down, to move forward with this project. That might also include investing some financial or capacity resources. So ultimately, we want to be able to get to a project description. So this slide really highlights a template. This is a format that we at Common Impact use very, very frequently. The majority of our descriptions are in this format. This is helpful for a few reasons. One, of course, it's nice to be consistent, but also if we can't get the project documented in this way, we're probably not there yet. And so if you're not able to get your project documented in some cohesive format, then you probably need to go back to the drawing board and uncover some more pieces. So we've got our project goals. So what's behind the challenge? What goal is it tied to? How will it help us achieve our mission? The project description. So this is a 1 or 2 sentences that says a team of volunteers will do XYZ. They will recommend a volunteer matching technology. And then the project phases or milestones. And this can be fairly high level, but typically the first phase is a discovery phase. So the volunteers work to understand the background of your organization and the challenge they're there to address. We coach our business or our corporate and skills-based volunteers don't start off with making recommendations. And so it's important for them to spend the time getting to know you and your organization before diving in and making recommendations. It doesn't make sense for a volunteer team to recommend that you implement Salesforce if you're a staff of 1 and you have no budget, right? There's a more right-sized solution out there for you. And so it's very important that they honor that process, and you honor that process by providing them that background and information to the team. The next phase is usually kind of the team diving in and getting started on that work. So, okay, we understand all of your needs and goals and strategies for this new program. Now we're going to document the criteria and potential partners that we think would be a good fit for this program. We're going to provide a draft of that to you, and then that's going to lead into our final deliverable or the final phase, which is our deliverable. So we're going to present our recommendations to you. We're going to document that plan. We're going to give you a list of 10, right? So those are the typical 3 main phases that we see within a skills-based volunteering project. Lots more info in the resources and tools, but on how to manage each aspect of that. But you should have a bit of that, or you should have a general idea of that going in, and that will help you to ensure that you have right size expectations and that you are clear about the project scope. The final piece of it are the skills that are needed. So we want to be general, but also a bit general, but also specific in this. So when we think about, for example, a marketing project, if we are going to have somebody develop 3 to 5 key messages, a graphic designer is not necessarily somebody that's going to provide a lot of value there. So we want to make sure that we're able to get as descriptive as possible. So we might think about using terms like content development, audience messaging segmentation, communication strategy. again, we have lots of we have lists of these types of specific skills that are that we frequently utilize with our corporate partners in some of the resources that we'll share. So certainly more detail there. These next few slides are of way too much text, I recognize, for a PowerPoint, but knowing that folks might want to access this PowerPoint after the fact, these are a few sample project descriptions within a few different functional areas so that you see how we have crafted and communicated these these different elements of the project description. And so encourage you all to spend some time going over these before you, or after the call, before you dive into the process yourself. I'm going to provide a little bit of guidance on next steps and kind of give everybody some homework, but I do want to pause and see if there are questions. All right, great. I'm recognizing we don't have a ton of time left, so I'm going to move us right along. And here we go to the tools and resources that I've referenced. Again, recognizing that I've shared a ton of info with you. Really excited about these two things. One is the Serve Ohio Skills-Based Volunteering Toolkit. It lives on the Serve Ohio website, and it is a very comprehensive resource of worksheets, templates. There's a sample project portfolio, lots of info, and Rebecca is sharing the link to that in the chat window. And then also Capacity Commons is an open source resource that Common Impact, along with many of our sector partners, launched last year, and it is your one-stop shop for all things SBV. And the Capacity Commons follows of the same model that you'll see highlighted in this webinar and also in the Skills-Based Volunteering Toolkit. But is a online kind of management tool. So it'll really walk you through the process. You can even save your responses and descriptions in the tool and come back to revisit them. The other thing that is really exciting about Capacity Commons is that once you have a scoped project, it will link directly with volunteer matching technologies to support you in recruiting and matching to skilled volunteers. So it is truly a one-stop shop and something that I encourage everybody to check out after the fact. So once you've done that and get that really solid grounding in skills-based volunteering, then I encourage you to go through the process. Okay, so getting started with either organizational goals or challenges that you're seeing. And again, this slide is a mess intentionally, right? We all recognize that there's lots of challenges, lots of goals that we might have. And so, document all of them. Start with a messy brainstorm. And then once you've identified a need, dig into it, explore the why, get folks in the room to get diverse perspectives, ask those questions that we touched on earlier. What's missing? Where do I start? What's most needed? And again, we've got the toolkit has worksheets that really follow this process. But again, just recognizing, spend the time to really explore the need. And then write up that project description. If you're really struggling to write the project description, then go back and explore that need a bit more until you can get to a place where you can craft and document something that will help a volunteer understand what you need. And then it's time to recruit volunteers. I shared how you can do that on Capacity Commons, but you'll want to cast a wide net. So once you have that concrete project description, you can utilize that as a marketing tool. Your board of directors are likely connected to lots of companies. They themselves might have some of the skills needed to support or be able to refer you to the finance or HR department within their organization. Do you have existing corporate partners? Skills-based volunteering is an great way to add a layer or deepen a partnership with an existing corporate volunteer. That is something that we hear consistently from the companies that we work with is we are supporting this nonprofit in XYZ way, and we'd love to deepen that. We'd love to explore how we can make a bigger impact. And we have all of these volunteers with all of these amazing skills, and how can we leverage those skills to help XYZ nonprofit? Local intermediary organizations, do you have a strong volunteer connector organization in your community, a United Way, a Points of Light affiliate, or other service club? We talked about Capacity Commons. There's other things like Taproot or Catch a Fire. There are additional general volunteer matching technologies that you could use as well. You likely will need to cast a wide net and talk to multiple potential volunteers or volunteer groups. This is a great way to get started. All right. Again, I know I have thrown a lot at you. And I'll leave some, I'll stand by for questions, but I just wanted to recap very quickly that as an immediate next step, if skills-based volunteering sounds exciting and impactful and like a good opportunity for you, dive into those tools and resources. Do not reinvent the wheel. The information is out there, and will really help you. You want to scope a narrow, defined project. Just remember that slide that says we need help with marketing is not an SBV project, and review some sample or examples of other projects as well. Craft a project description, and then your next step being to recruit volunteers. Those resources that I identified have a significant number of resources on managing your project as well. But for the purposes of this webinar, we really dove into the scoping. And then Rebecca, can I turn it over to you really quickly? I apologize, I gave you barely any time.
Sure. Thank you, Margie, for really, really great information. I just wanted to take a quick minute to plug our Serve Ohio's Skills-Based Volunteers and Training Academy. So if you liked the content today, if you're interested in getting more into skills-based volunteerism and feel like maybe you need some support in doing this work, we actually have a training academy that we're currently accepting applications to that provides support and technical assistance for nonprofits who are looking to engage in skills-based volunteerism. It's a 12-month training class, training academy where nonprofits will be asked to scope and recruit volunteers and create one skills-based volunteer project. So if you're interested, go to our website. I will link it here in the chat box. The deadline for applications is January 14th, and we'll kick off the Training Academy with a boot camp in March, where we'll kind of do a deep dive into all things skills-based volunteers, and we'll support nonprofits going through this process over 12 months. So just a plug for that. Check it out if you are interested in getting more information on skills-based volunteerism. So with that, we'll stick around for just a couple minutes if anybody has any lingering questions, but thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for your interest in skills-based volunteerism, and please reach out if you have any additional questions and utilize the resources that we've added today. So we'll stick around for just a minute, but thanks everyone and have a great afternoon. Okay, not seeing additional questions. So Margie, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. Have a good afternoon.
You too. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.